Thank you. Hello. What I'd like to do is sort of step back and change to a look at what are the fundamentals here and how can we look at it differently to try and get a different perspective on ways to solve these problems, looking a little more forward, stuff that I think is usable right now, but I think will be increasingly important in the future. So there's two major problems which are also opportunities, I think, that apply to digital content. One is what you can think of as a long tail of price sensitivity, which is really the demand curve, the fact that different people will pay different amounts for your content. So if you look at this, the green box is really at a set price. That's the revenue you get at your set price. The people to the left on that curve are the people willing to pay your set price or more. And the point is that even though a lot of those people would pay more, that red area is revenue that you're leaving on the table because they only pay the set price. The other side of that is the long tail. There's huge numbers of people, depending on your price, who aren't willing to pay what your set price is. So that's a lost opportunity, even though many of those people might pay a significant fraction of your, is this on a timer? Pay a significant fraction of what your set price is. So there's a lot of revenue there that you're leaving. Now, this is also hard to deal with because it's really dynamic. It depends on the context. It's not a simple curve. It just generally has that shape. The other thing, of course, is what Howard was talking about at the beginning. Digital products are different. There's no marginal cost, more or less. You're basically selling entitlements to access, not so much the product itself, but some access to the product in different ways. I'm sorry, that confused me there. So you can measure all of this and you can use free as a selling tool, which obviously a lot of people are doing. We've got freemium, which is very popular. People have actually made pay what you want work in a lot of contexts. The question is, what else can you do to take advantage of these opportunities? So the thing that I'm suggesting is really critical and a major opportunity is to view this holistically and not view it as single transactions, but optimizing your price over the life of the relationship with the customer. And of course, you risk a few transactions in order to seek this win-win relationship over time. And the other aspect of doing that is to reintegrate discovery and testing deeply into the process so that you're tracking what people are doing based on online capabilities. You've got rich usage instrumentation and rich dialogue that lets you bring a new level of understanding of your customer. So that's one of the opportunities, I think, to exploit. The other opportunity is sort of an interesting idea, and John Blossom gave me this example, and he did a blog post a few weeks ago on FairPay that gives you this nice example of the Spanky and our gang, the Little Rascals, were doing a play where they were trying to charge a penny admission to their friends. And all their friends are saying, well, how do we know it's any good? Why should we pay a penny? So Spanky says, well, here's what I'll do. You go in and see the play, and if you like what you see, you pay me as you exit. So they say, well, that's fair enough. We'll try that. And they all go in and watch the play. So that's something which hardly anyone is doing in the online world, and it's very easy to do online because you can track and you can go back to people and say, okay, now pay me. So how do we use this? And this is sort of an architecture, and this is the basic process. You can do variations, but the heart of it, I think, is kind of basic. You start with a gated offer to a given amount of entitlement for a given amount of time on the upper left. So you make an offer like a subscription, a month, 2 months, you try it. And the deal is you're going to try it, see if you like it, and then you set the price afterwards as a fair price. So that's sort of like pay as you exit. I call it price it backward. But what we're adding is now on the internet, you can track that price. And you can see how did that customer pay. And you can assess it, is it fair to the seller? And then based on that, you extend the offer forward if they're fair. And you say, okay, I'm going to make more offers, and if they paid a good price, I'm going to give better offers. If it's a low price, I'm going to give more limited offers. You can tune it. So now you've got an incentive for people to pay fairly, based on their actual value, and you make this into a continuing process where you're constantly motivating them, making new offers, and balancing to figure out exactly what they need, what they will pay, and how to serve them. So that's sort of the heart of it. To the customers, it's obviously kind of attractive because you pay what seems fair after you try it, and you just agree to do that fairly and to explain why. So you can have forms where you set predefined reasons so it's easy to process and analyze. You can allow for a free-form input, and you present this as a privilege that's revocable if they don't behave well. So from the seller side, of course, the real question is, do I get enough control and predictability? Do they pay enough? The heart of this is, some of the words are framing, nudging, and tracking. You can think of it as a managed dialogue, a choice architecture, where when it's time to ask for pricing, after they've used it, the seller reports the usage, provides a suggested price schedule based on what they used and how, and the buyer sets the price in terms of a differential from that suggested price. So then you can state, the buyer states their reasons, and then the seller can evaluate the fairness of those reasons and then decide whether or not to frame new offers. And you can think of this as managing FairPay credit. If they're credit worthy, you give them better and better offers. If they're not so credit worthy, you don't. So you're constantly nudging them toward their suggested prices as they evolve, and you're constantly testing and reviewing the value propositions and the offers, framings, and incentives as you go along. So this, we can get into in Q&A if anyone wants the details, but you can think of this as a value discovery engine that's doing this framing, nudging, and tracking. You're coexisting with a conventional price zone because there's probably a good baseline, but now you've got this engine that on the right is looking at value and fairness and feeding that back in to make offers. And you're sorting your users based on how they pay and what offers you're going to make them. So you can vary that in a lot of ways, but that's sort of the heart of the process. So what you're doing is getting a real dialogue with your customers, and you're getting a new level of market research that never existed. You can get dynamic price and value discovery data, real willingness to pay, and specific to the actual product, the buyer, and the context. So you use the profile-based offer models, these trials, which are mutual discovery, and I'm suggesting this can get you to higher margins and much deeper market penetration. So where can this apply? Pretty much any kind of subscription or ongoing service, and also in aggregators, iTunes, Amazon, app stores could be doing it as well. In terms of how you can do it at a single vendor level. The New York Times could do it, the Blaze could do it. You can also do it cross-vendor where there's added leverage because now you have shared infrastructure and shared processes. So someone like Zuora could provide this as a service. There's also an important new dimension here, which is the FairPay reputation database, this data you're collecting, because across vendors, you're collecting it for lots of vendors in detail, and it becomes sort of like a credit rating database, where now, even if you don't know a customer who comes to you very well, you can look them up and say, what's his reputation, and get a fair amount of detail about that, and decide what kind of offers to make. So I think that's a major database asset and a first mover advantage for a platform environment. Just a couple other comments on why this can be valuable. One is it's a way to do usage and value pricing that's buyer friendly. Lots of people like flat rates. They don't like ticking meters and usage shock. But now you're pricing considering usage, but it's the buyer that sets the price. So they can factor in volume discounts. They can soften the extremes and average it out. They don't have to go exactly to what they used, but it roughly tracks to volume, and you can push them to more or less track to volume. More generally, this gets you into a way to do price discrimination in a way that's accepted by the buyer, because you're not discriminating on the buyer, you're getting the buyer to self-discriminate. So you're engaging them in a process where they decide what's the fair price in their context, and you can do segmentation in any number of dimensions, including ability to pay, context, and all these other kinds of things. So where do you start? This is a slide I won't get into detail, but the one way to look at it is over the life cycle of the transaction. You can start at the beginning and use it like a fuzzy freemium, where you don't have a hard line between free and paid. You have this fuzzy FairPay line as to what's free and what's paid for new customers. You can use it at the other end on a retention scheme. If you've got people canceling, you can say, well, wait a minute, we'll try this as a FairPay thing, and there's almost no risk because you've lost them anyway. You can also do it by segments, high segments, low segments, give them the cream to get your premium people, do low-end segments. There's all kinds of ways to cut this. So it's really a flexible architecture that can be tuned in a lot of ways. So that's sort of the basic idea. Again, the dynamic is you keep cycling through the process. You've got this balance of forces between the buyer setting his price, but the seller controlling the offers. So that, I think, is going to converge on a much better economic solution than the tools we're using now, and I think that works in a modern online environment. So that's basically what I wanted to cover now. We can, there's more time for Q&A, and I'm happy to do consults with anyone who wants to look at how this applies to a specific business.